and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to yet another very exciting episode of the Daily News with yours truly, Le Presidente, Le Comédie Afrique. And today we're talking about the world as we know it, yeah? And I just want to applaud and appreciate the Chinese. The Chinese are the most populous race in the world. They're the majority, around 2 point something billion. But you'll never hear certain things in China that you will hear in Africa or even in Europe. The Chinese are the most in population, and yet you've never heard of famine or drought. We hear of famine and drought in Africa all the time. We collect money, children are starving in Africa, children are starving in India, children are starving in Jamaica, and yet the Chinese are 2.3 or something billion, but they never suffer from hunger or shortage of food because the Chinese eat everything that moves. If it moves, it's eaten. In fact, if a Chinese looks at you for more than 2 minutes, run, yeah? Now, that brings us to our topic of today. We have accused the Chinese of a lot of things. There are propagandas and issues. But the initial report was that in a market somewhere, somebody consumed a bat. And because of that, the colonization of the world. Everybody got sick because of one person. It could be propaganda, it could be true. Because of one person who ate a bat, yeah, the entire world got sick through colonization, corona. But how did corona affect the world? It affected the world differently. The American corona is not the same as the European corona. And the European corona was never the same as the African corona. And so forth, and even the Chinese one and the Indian. Everybody received and reacted differently to corona. Yeah? White people, European and Americans, were the most affected. They were the most affected. But the thing is that when corona was announced by the World Health Organization, everybody went into panic mode for Africa. Personally, I went into panic mode for Africa. Everybody said this is the disease that is going to wipe out an entire race, and that is Africa. Because there are no health facilities, there's no sanitation, they are crowded. There is people told me, oh, my friends from Kibera, because, we are too close to each other, we can't social distance. Africa is going to be wiped out. Ladies and gentlemen, shock on the world. America and Europe were the most affected in terms of infections and even deaths. And some people started asking, hey, what's going on? To an extent that someone on CNN went on live interview and said they were surprised that Africans were not dying because that was the expectation. Today I'm here to tell you why, because the world has been asking, how come Africa was the least affected by corona? Let me tell you why, using myself as an example. Africans were ready and prepared for corona all their life. All our lives we've been getting ready and preparing for any epidemic. Africans were ready. When I was 5 years old, true story, I had cholera, malaria, diarrhea, typhoid, marasmus, and had not eaten. But I still went to school. My mother would ask, has the child eaten? Yes. If the child has eaten, they can go to school. I was diarrheaing while nursing malaria, and I had typhoid and marasmus and kwashiorkor. I survived 5 diseases in my body, and you are telling me about corona. Africans were ready. Malaria is only found in Africa, in quotes, if you know what I mean. So it's kwashiorkor and marasmus and all these tropical diseases. We were just preparing for that. So when corona came into our body, corona was welcomed by other diseases like malaria. And they told corona, young man, chill out. We've been here for years. We've tried our best. You go to your corner, relax. Africans were prepared for corona. Even though they tried the colonization of Africa by sending aids and everything, I am explaining to you today the reason as to why corona affected Africa the least is because the African body has gone through worse, has seen worse diseases. I've seen dysentery, you name it, you find it in Africa. So we were not moved by corona. We were not flabbergasted by corona. I remember when I was a kid, I once hit my toe. My toe was hanging like this, and my mom punished me for it. Yeah? So African kids were prepared early enough. African kids are born ready, and they are trained for corona. So Africa was the least affected by corona, and I've told you why. Because you need to prepare for any eventualities. And you know, in America, for example, children are raised. Yeah, children are brought up. Yeah, in America, children are raised. They are brought up. In Africa, we grow. We grow. Children grow. We go through growth. We just grow. Like when a child in America or in Europe receives discipline, it's different. Jeremy, go to your corner and sit in your corner and think about what you've done. That is a punishment. That's a punishment. When I was in school, we had something called corporal punishment.
Now you can come to 1. Minimum is 1, maximum is 6. It depends on the offense. Mm-hmm. If the parents have come here, 6. But in these are normal.
Yeah, there are certain schools that the teachers were using canes. In my school, Sumu boys, there was no single day my headmaster or deputy headmaster used a cane. It was war. If you did a mistake, you'd be taken to the principal's office. He'd lock the door, throw away the key, and then call the deputy, and then you go to war. They fold their sleeves. There's a very funny story of a principal of mine who had this habit of locking himself in the office with students and punishing them. So this day we went to the window, and the students would always cry. Teacher, you are killing me. Oh, I'll never repeat. So this particular day, this student was taken to the office and was being beaten. Whoa! Pa, 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 pa. There was, sir, I will never repeat, sir. Oh, sir. Boo, boo. Oh, sir. Then there was silence. And then all of a sudden, oh, my son. Tables are turned. The headmaster was receiving the beating. But my point is, in Africa we grow and we go through a lot of hardships that prepared us for things like corona, unlike the West, yeah? And of course, we had lockdowns all over the world.
The National Coronavirus Command Council has decided to enforce a nationwide lockdown for 21 days.
That there shall be a cessation of all movement by road, rail, or air into and out of the disease-infected area.
And I know that by the grace of God, He has heard our cry. Nonetheless, each one of us must do his or her part.
And every lockdown was different. I remember in Kenya, very many people got married by force, and very many people got divorced by force, because your husband left to go to work in the morning, and by 4 p.m. the president announces, we have locked the city. Nobody comes into Nairobi, nobody goes out for 2 months. Your husband is gone, never to come back. And the lady who visited a young man in his house, yeah, and the president announces, curfew. Curfew begins at 5, and the president has announced it at 4:44. Yeah? And you live 3 hours away. That is how the lady spent at the man, and they're married until today. So Corona brought about loss of businesses, closure of businesses, marriages, divorces. There are children that should be named Corona, children that were conceived because of lockdowns and curfews. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us again on yet another very exciting episode of the Daily News with yours truly, Eric Omondi, the president of Comedy Africa. I hope you enjoyed this episode on Corona. Until next week, bye-bye.